Hello everyone, my name is Puyang. The paper that I'm going to present is Acoustic-Prosodic and Articulatory Characteristics of the Mandarin Speech, Conveying Dominance and Submissiveness. This is the outline of my presentation. First, let me introduce the background of our study. Dominance and submissiveness constitute a pair of mutual opposite attitudes that are widely used in social affective speech communication, especially when the interlocutors have different social status. Here, dominance is an aggressive attitude, whereas submissiveness is a non-aggressive one. According to O'Hara's frequency code hypothesis, humans and other mammals use the frequency cues in their vocal sounds to convey the body size information, which is usually related to the status of aggressiveness or non-aggressiveness. For example, a lower ethereal and an enlarged vocal tract size are related to a larger body size information, which is correlated with aggressiveness or dominance. In contrast, a higher ethereal and a smaller vocal tract are related to a smaller body size impression, which is associated with non-aggressiveness or submissiveness. However, very few experimental studies have been conducted on the speech conveying dominant or submissive attitudes, except some studies reported a lower ethereal, higher intensity, and faster speech rate in dominant speech than in submissive speech. For articulatory studies, to our knowledge, there has been no reports on dominant or submissive speech. Some studies on emotional speech reported that angry speech, which is closely related to aggression, is featured with more prominent jaw lowering and wider range of tongue movement. However, how does dominant or submissive perform in articulatory manner is still unknown. Therefore, due to the very limited knowledge on dominant and submissive speech, we raised our research question: what are the acoustic-prosodic and articulatory features of dominant and submissive speech in Mandarin Chinese, and does the frequency code hypothesis apply or not? Let's see the method of our study. We recruited 33 native speakers of Standard Mandarin. Their height was controlled because body size is positively correlated with vocal fold length and vocal tract size. 12 target utterances with neutral literal meaning were designed, and all utterances can be expressed in dominant or submissive when embedded in different contexts. We used the role-play paradigm to elicit the attitudinal speech. For each target sentence, 2 scenarios were designed to elicit 2 opposite attitudes. All speech materials are presented by cartoon pictures to make a better role play. Audio data were recorded using a lavalier microphone. Articulatory data were recorded using NDI wave electromagnetic articulography. To track the movements of the articulators, sensors were placed in the mid-sagittal plane adhere to the tongue tip, tongue blade, and tongue dorsum, the upper and lower lips, and the lower incisor. A reference sensor was placed on the forehead. This is an example of our elicitation process. Altogether, we collected 792 utterances. After data collection, we conducted a perceptual validation. 20 native listeners of Mandarin were asked to judge the attitudes of the speaker after hearing a target utterance in a 2 alternative voice choice task. The overall recognition rate is around 70%, Only those utterances with a recognition rate above 75% were adopted for further analysis. Finally, we got 207 sentences for dominance and 206 sentences for submissive. Here is an example of dominant speech.
他和这事无关。
And here is an example of submissive speech.
他和这事无关。
Next, we extracted ethereal, intensity, and duration as the acoustic-prosodic features. For articulatory features, first, we conducted a principal component analysis on the coordinates of 3 tongue sensors. The first 2 components were selected to approximate the lingual gestures, as tongue horizontal movement and tongue vertical movement. Lip protrusion and lip opening were then calculated using these 2 formulas. The means and ranges of TH, TV, LP, and LO were then calculated for each utterance. Linear mix effects models were conducted to compare prosodic and articulatory parameters between dominant and submissive speeches. 2 key post hoc tests were then conducted to make a pairwise comparison. Next, let's see the prosodic results. The result of ethereal analysis shows that for male speakers, dominant speech shows higher ethereal than submissive. However, female speakers don't show significant differences between dominant and submissive. Also, the range of ethereal is wider in dominant speech than in submissive speech. For intensity, dominant speech shows a higher mean intensity and wider intensity range than submissive speech. Also, dominant speech has a shorter duration than submissive, which means dominant has a faster speech rate than submissive speech. Next, let's see the articulatory results. The results of tongue movement don't show much differences between dominant and submissive, except that dominant shows a wider tongue vertical movement range than submissive. For lip protrusion, dominant speech exhibits more protruded lips and a wider range of lip movement in horizontal dimension. For lip opening, dominant speech exhibits more open lips and wider range of lip movement in vertical dimension. The last part of my presentation is discussion and conclusion. Our paper investigated both prosodic and articulatory features of the Mandarin speech conveying dominant or submissive attitudes. For prosodic features, dominant speech showed a wider ethereal range, a higher intensity, and a faster speech rate than submissive speech. For articulatory features, dominant speech exhibited a wider range of tongue vertical movement, a larger lip protrusion, and lip opening. Do our findings comply with the frequency code hypothesis? Our finding on mean ethereal does not coincide with the frequency code, especially the higher ethereal that found in dominant speech of male speakers is contrary to frequency code. On the other hand, the articulatory finding on a larger vocal tract in dominant speech than in submissive speech complies with the frequency code. This result suggests that frequency code can be encoded either in phonation or in articulation, but not necessarily both. Although the finding of a wider ethereal range, A higher intensity and a faster speech rate in dominant speech suggest accounts of prosodic intensification when expressing aggressive or dominant attitude. Whereas the finding of a wider range of tongue vertical movement in dominant speech than in submissive speech is similar to previous findings on emotional speech, which showed a hyperarticulation of tongue in the speech of high arousal emotions. Here is our conclusion. The Mandarin speech conveying dominant attitudes is characterized by a prosodic intensification, a vocal tract expansion, and a hyperarticulation of tongue in comparison to the submissive speech. These are the references in our presentation. Thanks for watching.